Is the volume on, you said?
It's on. I'm not sure how loud it is, but I think it'll be loud enough.
Boy. Hopefully this volume works. Okay, I'm good.
Go.
Oh. Okay, you guys are all probably wondering why you have jelly beans out on your desk, so why don't you try them, and then I'll explain why you have them. Yes! Everybody trying them? Okay. Got the taste? Now raise your hand if you got a good tasting jelly bean. Okay, raise your hand if you got an odd tasting jelly bean. Okay. The second half of you that just raised your hand represent the 50% of marriages in America that end in divorce. If you look at my comic, these people just got married. So here's the registrar in church. Over here, happily ever after land represents the couples that stay married and they're happy. The hell and back represents the couples that get married but aren't happy, and divorce card obviously represents the couple that gets a divorce. Okay, so I'm sure that all of you guys at one point have thought about getting married, but the question is, have you ever thought about how you're going to prevent yourself from being the 1 out of 2 couples that get a divorce? I want to be a biblical marriage and family therapist, so I've done the research on this topic and I read books on this topic, and I'm hoping that the information I have and my background and my new proposed policy will help to increase the odds that you'll have a lasting marriage in the future. Today I'm going to talk about the lack of honest vows happening in America that's resulting in higher divorce rates, broken homes, and multiple marriages throughout a person's lifetime. First, I'm going to reveal statistics about the current status of divorce and marriage in America. Then I'm going to talk about the first part of my policy and then the second part of my policy. From divorce statistics in the USA, it says that 50% of first marriages end in divorce. Most people think that they'll be better prepared for their second marriage, but the facts show that this isn't true. A second marriage has an increased 65% chance of getting a divorce. Also, the Population Reference Bureau of Divorce stated that in 2009, 18.9 million children grew up in single-mothered homes. So divorce is not only affecting the adults in the relationship, but it's also affecting the children. These increasing divorce rates in America need to be stopped, and this is why I'm proposing a new marriage policy. The first part of my policy will deal with couples that decide they want to get married, and they'll be put on a 6-month waiting period before the actual wedding day can happen. 3 months of the 6 will deal with premarital counseling. Many people decide to get married during the age of 20 to 24 years, which most of us fall into that category. If you look at my next slide. Okay, so this is the age of marriage for those who divorce in America. If you see our age group, if you get married, have the highest chance of resulting in a divorce years down the road. An interesting contributor to this is that the frontal lobe of the brain that deals with judgment, impulse control, problem solving, and social and sexual behavior doesn't fully mature until age 25. So this age group is at a disadvantage because the frontal lobe of their brain actually isn't fully developed when they get married. So to go on more further, let's talk about the impulse. Most of us have been in a relationship where we felt the puppy love phase or the love obsessed phase. Dr. Gary Chapman wrote a book called The 5 Love Languages, which I've read. And he says that really you're in this love-obsessed phase for the first 2 years of a relationship. So when people get married during that first 2 years, and then the feelings for their spouse start to change, they don't know what that means. This is why the 6-month period will be put into place to allow the couple more time to get to know each other and to hopefully get closer to that 2-year mark. Premarital counseling, which is half of this 6 months, will help them to understand what those change of feelings mean. It'll also help to rid them of unrealistic expectations they may have for the marriage. It'll prepare them for the monotonous relationship, sacrifices that will need to be made throughout the marriage, and also allow them to take compatibility tests to see what aspects they may be different on. Divorce statistics in the USA also stated that couples who received premarital counseling had a much lower rate for divorce. This is because, quote, they worked out their problems in a common neutral setting before the actual situations arose. So the first part of my policy is going to help people to take the part of the vow, till death do us part, more seriously. The last part of my policy would deal with couples that were married and wanted a divorce. They would also have to go on a 6-month period, half dedicated to marriage therapy of their choice, before they'd be allowed to get it. It's true that most people who've gotten a divorce 5 years later can't remember the specific reason why they separated. This is because many divorces happen over heated arguments and ill thought out and impulse decision making. In the Huffington Post from this past February, they stated that couples who had intended on getting a divorce before the economy took a downturn decided to stay together because of financial difficulties. You would think that once the economy got back up, that they would follow through and get their divorce. But studies show that because they were forced to stick together through a period of time when it was difficult, they actually wanted to stay married because they had worked through their issues. So as I mentioned earlier, adults aren't the only ones being affected. Children are being affected. In Medical News Today, a child researcher stated that children who see their parents go through a divorce have a much higher risk for divorce later on in their life. So the 6-month period with 3 months dedicated to therapy will help to show a good model for children of people in a committed relationship working through their disagreements instead of just giving up. So in conclusion, today I talked to you guys about the current status of divorce and marriage in America. I talked to you about the first part of my policy, which deals with 6 months and premarital counseling before the wedding day. And I talked to you about the second part of my policy, which deals with 6 months, half dedicated to marriage therapy before a couple would be allowed to get a divorce. So for the future, unless you want to experience something worse than a bitter jelly bean, I would ask you guys to accept my new proposed marriage policy and so that you can be the 1 out of 2 couples that stay married, and even better, help to increase the odds of lasting marriages in America. Thank you.
Don't you think with all your marriage counseling and stuff, you're kind of standardizing marriage? Like, isn't getting married supposed to be about being in love and stuff?
Yeah, I don't think that the therapy will make them in love or not in love. It's just going to help prepare them for the marriage. Like, before the marriage, many people have like unrealistic expectations about what it's going to be like, and a lot of people get married soon in the relationship, so it'll help them prepare for what it'll be like. And then if they're already in the marriage, it'll help them to work through their problems instead of just giving up and trying a new person. And they also get to pick their therapist in this policy, so if you're religious, you can pick a Christian counselor. If you're not religious, you can pick a different type of counselor. So you do have that freedom to pick the counselor of your choice.
Are there like any policies like this in other countries?
Yeah, Sweden actually has a policy. They're really pro-family. Like when there's a child born, the dad and the mom both get time off work. And so what they do in Sweden is if you're married and you have any children under the age of 16, you have to go on a 6-month waiting period. So they do have a similar policy to that.
Are there any circumstances where they would be able to get divorced without like going through counseling? Because like what if something like awful happens? Like what if
like
there's
they
abuse
cheat
or something?
Or something? Oh, abuse, okay. Well, the reason this policy goes together is because I'm planning that the 6 months and the premarital counseling before the wedding day will help people to understand like who they're marrying, and the person that would maybe cheat or whatever, they'll be more prepared for like what they're really getting into. But if that did happen, I'm going to talk about that in my argument speech about like, there could be exceptions. So this would just be for the majority.
One thing I find interesting is that, I don't know, just from things you've said in class, it seems like you have a pretty conservative perspective, like
Of marriage?
or of marriage and maybe of other sorts of political things.
Mm-hmm.
So I'm really interested because you're talking about a major government intervention into people's private lives, which is something that many conservatives are really against.
Yeah.
Right? So can you talk about that?
Yeah, and that's actually a big thing I was gonna talk about in my next speech about like the free will issue. The reason that I think that this doesn't really fall in that category is because getting a divorce, like I talked about, affects like more than just the adults. It affects the kids, but the kids don't have a say-so in the parents getting a divorce or not. And so this would just, and there is freedom within this policy. You do get to pick when or what type of counseling you'll receive. And so this would just help prepare the marriage for like what is going to happen, if it would help them to like give it a good shot before they gave up on the marriage. And this is like also looking out for the kids who don't have any say-so in it. And so it is a more like a liberal take, I guess you could say, because it is more like government controlled, but I think it's necessary because it's not just involving the couple. Their decision affects their kids too. So it's more of like looking out for the total family. So.
Never mind.
Within your policy, would there be specific rules about like living arrangements? Because like if a couple is separated and they have to like go to counseling for 3 to 6 months, they could be like living separately. The only time they see each other is in counseling, so it really like defeats the purpose of trying to work through their issues if they see each other for an hour every week for 3 months.
I mean, this wouldn't deal with a couple's living arrangement. They could be living together and decide, okay, we want to get married, and then go through the 6 months process. They could not be living together.
I'm talking about the divorce half. Sorry, the second half of your policy.
Oh, the divorce half. Well, I would think that if the couple knew before they could get a divorce, they'd have to go through a 6-month period. Then they would probably, I would assume, probably stay living in the same house. But if they weren't, then that would be their choice to meet only on the counseling days. And I'm hoping that as they went through counseling, they would want to see each other more than just in the counseling sessions. So I mean, that's their own, deal of how much they want to see each other outside of that.